again, this is Alan Schimmel, Editor-in-Chief of DevOps.com, and today's webinar is using APM to turbocharge continuous integration. As I mentioned, it is sponsored by CA Technologies, and we're very lucky to have a great panel to join me today. First of all, we have Matt LeRae, Senior VP of Business Unit Exec at CA Technologies. And from CloudBees, a friend of mine, Brad Johnson, VP of Product Marketing. Matt, Brad, welcome to today's webinar.
Thanks, Alan.
Yep,
Great to be here.
Thank you. So, guys, I just wanted to start off giving our listeners, beyond how to use questions or how to ask questions, I wanted to give our listeners just a kind of quick overview of the agenda for today's program. And I think we've just about completed introductions right now, and we're going to jump right into current environment and go down the list as we see from here. Again, this is sponsored by CA, and CloudBees is joining in, so thank you both for making this possible. And with that being said, I think we're going to kick things off. Well, we've kind of done our panelist introduction, so we're going to hop right past that, but you get to see what the guys look like as well as their Twitter handles here. Okay, gentlemen, we ready? Let's start right here.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Alan.
No, I was going to jump on this. Okay. So, we have, the title of the slide says it all kind of, right? Too little DevOps, too much repair. According to Forrester, 80% of MTTR is actually MTTI. So 80% of what we're doing is that we consider as repairs is actually identify. Matt or Brad, what you want to chime in on that?
Sure. Yeah, this is in many ways sort of one of the traditional APM problems, but with the advent of continuous integration and continuous delivery, we're moving everything faster through the process, which I think we'll talk a little bit about even in the next slide. But what Forrester's really saying here is that when we as devs, my background was in development. When we as developers go and push code out, there's just naturally going to be a set of problems that come with that, right? And then when you add in through the different pieces of the life cycle, by the time it gets to operations, whether that's a single click, if you're really embracing DevOps, or you still have a traditional application development pipeline, there's a lot of problems that get picked up along the way. So just kind of setting the stage here, the survey with Forrester is that a lot of the expense around developing applications isn't just in writing the code; it's in maintaining the code and then understanding the environment and finding problems in the environment. So that's really what a lot of this webinar is going to be focused on, is really on shortening down that mean time to identify, to helping you find where those problems are coming from and sort of their nature. Brad, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I would just add that, to the point and to the topic of the webinar, DevOps has come a long way. Love the DevOps report that's quoted here, because it really talks about the fact that DevOps is established in organizations now and here to stay. It may morph over time, but it's here to stay. And still one of the biggest areas to focus on is the ops aspect of this. And so we'll talk about the Jenkins community and the popularity of CI. As we get out there in the market and talk about Jenkins, we see many, many more ops professionals, frankly, flocking to learn more about how they can get more information both out of the system and then also back into the system. So we're going to go into that more. But yeah, great stats, and it just underlines the importance of getting more information, from the ops side sooner and faster.
Got it. Guys, before we move to the next slide, though, I realize, there may be folks in our audience who are not clear of what MTTR and MTTI is. Matt, do you want to just lay it out for us?
Sure. So MTTR means mean time to repair, which is a measurement that that operations organizations use to measure how long it takes to fix applications. Right. So part of that, it breaks down, and there's some sort of legacy processes around that in a lot of organizations. But basically means how long does it take me to find out where the problem is coming from. You know, if I'm in a haunted house, where is the creaking coming from? Where are the ghosts popping out? And you might, in your organization, you might experience this in your day-to-day lives by sitting on conference calls that have 30 people on them, and you're all on, you know, FlowDoc or Slack or whatever, you know, going back and forth and taking screenshots from different tools, trying to figure out, you know, where is the problem? Why is it breaking? Is it a code problem? Is it a database problem? Well, MTTR is basically a measurement of how long that process takes.
Excellent. And just quickly before we go on, there was an early question that I didn't want to wait till the end. When we talk about APM, we are talking about application performance management, though some people, I've heard it as monitoring. Interesting. Matt, as the CA, do you call it application performance management or application performance monitoring? Sounds like a TV commercial.
It's funny. You're kind of going back to a debate that we had about 10 years ago about this topic. So we call it management, application performance management. And we call it that because it really amounts to more than just simple monitoring. In many ways, a modern APM tool will be doing all kinds of analytics and machine learning and other things. And it really, at the peak of the mountain, it may actually be making changes to your environment based on that. So as an example, you may be using measurements from APM to understand that you need to allocate more VMs dynamically in AWS or whatever it is, right? So it really goes beyond just pure monitoring.
Absolutely. Okay, with that being said, let's move to our next slide. And so, you know, in this whole DevOps area, I kind of live in a DevOps echo chamber, and I think everyone is just doing DevOps. But it's important to remember that there are a lot of organizations that DevOps is still relatively new and novel to, and there are a lot of organizations that aren't doing DevOps. They're still doing waterfall, if we can call it that, or, you know, previous development methodologies. And, you know, when we look at, you know, some of these traditional approaches and the challenges to them, I think we all, or at least all of us on the panel today, have experienced firsthand some of these gotchas, some of these roadblocks, some of these just terrible nightmare scenarios that pop up in trying to get applications from planning to deployment to actually use out, you know, in the wild, and you know, in a lot of ways, you know, part of what we do in DevOps is trying to avoid some of these pitfalls. And, you know, I just want to call out the obvious ones along the top here, right? Deadlock with developers, constrained environments, manual testing versus automation, too little testing, too late in the cycle, especially with security oftentimes, too many disparate tools, manual scripting, poor customer, and of course they all lead to poor customer experience. And, you know, Matt and Brad, I don't know if you want to chime in here. I think these kind of speak for themselves, but certainly, you know, there had to be a better way, and these are the things that kind of, I think, lead us to DevOps and Lean and Agile and, you know, doing a better way of doing things here. Correct?
Agreed.
Okay. Matt, I wanted to kind of hand this slide over to you here. We talk about, you know, the DevOps in context of CI to CD, and I guess given our previous questions, we should lay out continuous integration to continuous delivery. Fair enough?
Yeah, actually, Brad, I think this is a topic that you were.
I'm sorry, did I say Matt? I meant Brad. I apologize. Brad,
Nope.
do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, and one real comment I want to make to the previous slide is just that it's amazing how
I'm sorry, Brett. We had a
all right.
little premature movement on their slide there. Go ahead.
Not a problem. Just making a point on the last slide is that all those boxes at the top. The irony is every single one of those has been fixed, right? So there are ways to improve the capabilities in each of those areas, and also a key point in all of those areas is the wait time and the delays that are incurred mostly by manual processes. So this slide kind of lays out and really helps to define some of the areas that a lot of people sometimes get a little bit stopped up on related to DevOps. So the bottom of the diagram is really about what we all do, and this really hasn't changed in some ways since software development was new, where there were development environments, there were staging environments, there was production, and they're always, those are still the states of the environment that we live in. If you could back up, it'll kind of play out the whole thing. What we do know is that user feedback, that user experience, has been driving the rapid changes to require even more and more rapid software development. So the need to go faster has been fully driven and defined by the changing behavior of the people that consume the services we deliver, whether we're a retailer or whether we're actually just providing software to internal users. Those users are becoming very, very demanding, and the changes that they need is fast. Well, Agile is maybe more than 15 years old, but as long as I've been in the business, pretty much, Agile has been influential in helping people and companies, and specifically teams, take an incremental approach to software development. So it's here to stay. If you look at the next build, and if you go back one more, Alan, continuous integration is a standard in the industry where teams have adopted the Agile approach to build small pieces of software development or of software and commit and build them in an automated way. So Jenkins, which is part of the topic here today, arose 10 years ago to solve this problem with automation. The new big change is really around continuous delivery, and that is taking the automated capabilities that continuous integration made standard inside of development and allowing that automation to progress into the production and production-like environments. So now companies are building executable code, packaging it into an application, packaging that application into an environment, and sending it to QA. So that all QA has to do is run tests, right? Likewise, it may go right past QA if everything's automated and go into live production, and that is the land of, as I've shown here, the land of the unicorns. But it's becoming more and more common that that software code is being automated all the way into live production, and we're going to talk a lot today about where APM comes into play when that happens, or even when there are very manual processes to get that software into production. But once it is, what happens when something goes wrong? How do we get information to do something, and then how do we get information how to get back to development and make things change? So this is just kind of an overview of how when it all comes together. If you do one more click, Alan, if you're doing all these tasks and your culture is really adapted to this is what you're doing when it comes to DevOps. So it looks like that build didn't work, but you want to go to the polling question now, and we can proceed.
I think I finally got it, Brad, just at the end here, but this is the whole picture, as they say. I apologize. I should have listened and not done the what do you call it, stages of the slides. My fault. Guys, let's go to our polling question, though, and this is something we wanted to ask our audience, and that is, what do you use today to help enable continuous delivery? And select one of the following: continuous integration tools, automated testing tools, release automation tools, application performance managing tools, or another class of tools perhaps not listed here. And if you guys can answer, well, it shouldn't take too long. I realize some of you may use more than one, but if you could answer which your primary tool is, perhaps we'll go with that. And we'll close test voting down here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. And survey says, wow, continuous CI tools represent 51%, and automated testing is about half of that, a little less than half. APM dragging at 11%. I wonder, Brad, Matt, is that kind of what you were expecting?
I'm not surprised at all, but I think there's a big opportunity that enables, right?
Yeah.
You know, APM is typically seen as sort of an operational discipline, kind of something that goes and finds what's broken, right, as opposed to something that helps actually improve the quality of code and the quality of the overall application system. Obviously, I think as we move along here, you'll hopefully find the audience, right? will hopefully find some reasons to bring it in, but I'm not surprised at this at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
I think the topic and the combination of how does CI and APM fit together is again, I'm postulating that probably why people are on the call to figure out where and how does APM work with the tools that they already have or are already working with. So I think it's a great indication of hopefully we're giving you guys a lot of information to take back and take some action on.
Yeah, I would just caution that I wonder if we had given people the opportunity to pick more than one class of tool, if that would change things. Guys, any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
No?
I think that would have changed it.
Possibly. All right, let's go to our next slide then, Jules, if we can go back to our slides. And moving along here now to our next. Okay. So bringing together APM and continuous integration. And this is really the kind of the focus of our webinar today. And as we saw with these answers, it's only 11% of you are currently using APM with CD and CI, but I do think it, and I see this in talking to people. One of the things, and it sounds almost ridiculous, but DevOps has evolved almost in silos itself, right? There's the APM crowd, the CI/CD crowd, the configuration management crowd. One of the, second-gen DevOps, if you will see those silos breaking down, and all of these DevOps tools now starting to work together, if you will. And and I think we'll see yet another spike in productivity, another spike in speed, accuracy, and security. But I'll defer to you guys. What do you see with this, Matt and Brad?
Well, it's interesting. Is that what is DevOps really doing, right? It's like we're on a mission, right, to improve the lives of developers. I kind of joke about that, but everyone working in this space really is providing a tool set that does two key things. One, it obviously helps you to make applications that make money, because that's why we're all here to some degree. But then the second thing, the more fun thing, is that it allows us to spend more time building code, right? More time having fun and less time fixing broken stuff, right? So one of the things that, to your point about kind of Gen 2 companies, right? People who are really sophisticated with DevOps that we see, like we have a customer out in the financial services industry, which is one of the most conservative industries, right? And they're pushing 30,000 changes straight through the CI and CD pipeline into production every month, right? So even they have found ways to do kind of what Brad said about going straight to production. And we are right, kind of getting to the meat of it. We're trying to help that along with our with the APM discipline by creating a bidirectional data sharing between both APM and Jenkins. So the idea behind this, which we'll show some screenshots and get into more depth in a minute, is that APM goes and monitors each build that's being produced during the CI cycle, and then does some analytics on it and some interesting sort of observations to understand the risk associated with that build. And then meanwhile, it takes a lot of performance data from APM and pushes it back into Jenkins, so that if you're looking at your build profile within Jenkins, you're looking at all of the performance, you're looking at the quality of the build. Now you kind of have that extra dimension of understanding the performance from inside the application. And that sounds simple because you might say, well, we have some performance testing today, which is good, maybe you do, but we can actually go to a much more granular level to improve the quality of the code as you're building it and kind of get you back on the things you actually want to do. So anyway, Brad, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think the only thing to add would be, Alan, I really like the concept of stage 2 DevOps, because I really think we have a little ways to go yet till we're there. One of my kind of fun experiments that I run when I meet DevOps people is kind of tongue-in-cheek. I ask them, well, are you dev or are you ops? And sometimes they're taken aback, but the reality is most people at this stage have started in one place or the other, and we're still trying to solve the problem. The really great news and a positive indicator of progress is how many organizations or how many teams that are using CI tools like Jenkins are actually doing what we define as continuous delivery, which is going beyond that just testing and just building and just compiling in dev, and that's really where on the CA side from Matt's perspective, once you've delivered, you're very, very close to deployment, right? And that's where you want to really play into how the monitoring and information you can gather from that live or staging deployment can be transferred back, and that's when you start getting true collaboration between the ops and the dev side, and truly getting this model in place. We'll probably move on to.
Yeah, Alan, are you?
There we go.
Okay.
Alan, are you there, or did we lose you?
Yes, I am here. I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
I was just trying to make the slides work, guys. Hopefully,
sure.
We are all seeing the slide I'm seeing here on APM and pre-mod. And Matt, why don't you explain to our audience a little bit about what we're seeing here?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that is always a good practice in any Agile organization is to be as data-driven as you can. And so one of the things that we did is we commissioned a study by Forrester to understand, like I said, for those companies that are really bringing together the entire tool chain, right, and kind of going to the next level, incorporating APM, what kind of benefits do they experience? And what we found, brought back to the napkin, was that they were able to accelerate the problem resolution by roughly 90%, and they were able to reduce the app delivery cycle time by about 15%. And you can read the quote yourself. What it amounts to is that when you use APM as part of the integration cycle, you start to see a benefit in both the quality of the code, because you're understanding the risk of the changes that are being made, and then you're also able to create a smoother pipeline on into production, which kind of brings us to the next slide. But Alan, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, not at all. I think you're the expert on this stuff, Matt, and I'll defer to you on it.
Okay, so what we're really saying here, by integrating APM into the continuous integration and continuous delivery lifecycle, we're really trying to create a smooth tool chain. Now, a lot of what we're doing in the DevOps world is sort of assembling our own tool chains and being very agile, right? So what I put forth, right, as part of this webinar, is that you can get a lot of benefit by incorporating some more of that IT operations like visibility into CI. And I'll talk a little in a few minutes about, or we will talk in a few minutes about specifically what that looks like, screenshots and technology. But what it means at kind of a process level is that we start to crunch down the software development lifecycle, and we start to create a tighter integration between development and IT operations. Now, if you get to really, I just said the realm of the unicorns, if you get into the area of some of the folks that we see fully embracing DevOps, they might be deploying straight into production, and they may even be supporting it through the developers themselves. But whatever your particular organizational mindset is, there's still a set of stuff that you have to do in an operations context. So just picking a couple sort of interesting things. If you let's say you're building a UI, right? And there's a big focus on design right now, both within my own company as well as out in the industry as a whole, kind of bringing that consumer-grade experience into all kinds of application development, whether it's enterprise or consumer-grade, whatever. And so one of the things that's key about that is understanding how the user's experience is driving the infrastructure need, and also driving, frankly, how well the app's being used. Example is, I live near San Francisco, so I get to ride public transit quite a bit. And as enjoyable as that is, I end up sort of standing a lot. And one of the things that we noticed when we went through and looked at user experience was that if I'm standing up, I tend to use my phone one-handed, and so I only really use the bottom quarter of the screen, right, because that's as far as my thumbs can reach. And apps, when you study this, apps that have all of their interaction in the bottom quarter of the screen tend to do better when people tend to do better for those type of use cases. However, if it's more like I'm filing my expense reports and taking screenshots, it doesn't matter so much, and I probably can spend my effort elsewhere. Now, if developers and product owners have that level of visibility, this entire cycle gets faster. And so APM, understanding that both from production as well as pre-production, sort of shortens the cycle time and allows you to spend more time on the things that matter. Now, there's a lot of different examples that of ways that you can make your life easier using APM. Even sort of basic stuff like understanding your cloud utilization, right? If you're paying by the hour, right? Or APM can help you figure those sorts of things out, right? So bringing in the life cycle shortens the time frame, allows you to kind of get to, as Alan said, that second generation a lot faster, and kind of makes life easier. So Alan, I don't know if you have anything further. Brad, you have anything further to add on that? Go ahead.
Brad?
Yeah, I think my comment there would be obviously just to fully agree that if you can pull the metrics and information about the performance and availability of an application and its effect on the end user into the development process, it in many ways it changes how the developer thinks about her code, and the better they are at thinking about how's this going to work when we scale it out, how's this is going to work. I love the analogy, Matt, about how is this going to work in a mobile environment and in contrast to a browser environment, right? All this information can both be captured earlier by just kind of changing the cultural understanding of how that code is going to behave in production, as well as getting metrics and information earlier into the experience by plugging in certain performance information and performance tests earlier in the life cycle. And CA certainly has the opportunity to provide tools and technology to do that earlier. And so I think everybody knows about how many stats there are about how when you find these problems before they hit production, how much less costly they are. So this is how you get there. So it's really great information, really great practice.
Yes, it is. Okay. Next slide.
Yeah, so this is our friend Jenkins, the butler that at least 51% of you are very familiar with, or at least a percentage of that percentage. Jenkins is actually quite a phenomenon. I'm relatively new to CloudBees, but I'm certainly very familiar with Jenkins. Jenkins has at least 1 million developers on it that are dependent on its automation as we speak. There's a lot more statistics behind this, but what makes Jenkins so popular is that it is by nature vastly extensible. I mean, that is the philosophy of its architect, who is also on staff here as the CTO of CloudBees, Kosuke Kawaguchi. And you know, as we speak, there are over 10 million jobs running that are crossing the gamut. So kind of if you build this out, and go ahead and build it you know, all the way through to deploy, Alan, you can see that the dependency that companies have on Jenkins connects everything that they have in their tool chain. Oops, it didn't build out. So
Yep, there we go.
There we go. So if you look at, you know, every stage, you see not just, in this case, this is mostly, you know, vendor tool sets, and obviously CA is prominent across the tool chain. But behind all of these vendors, there are also custom plugins that are made by development teams that have unique needs that fit every step of the pipeline. So this extensibility and the real dependency that companies have on Jenkins makes it obviously the logical choice for automation that it gets people to their objectives as far as getting software built faster, getting software fully tested to a better degree than they were able to do in the past, because lots of automation can be implemented. And then one stat that I didn't get onto a slide, but that I collected from our Jenkins surveys, is that 41% of Jenkins users today are doing what we would call continuous delivery, and that is taking, you know, that process beyond the scan and test phase and beginning to utilize technology and containerization to actually get that code into pre-prod and other environments. What this slide,
I apologize. The slides keep jumping. My
that's
fault.
right. That's a good transition. So
okay.
As you go to the next slide, one thing I want to talk about here is that on this journey to kind of an end-to-end DevOps approach, Jenkins absolutely can be the foundation for the CI/CD automation. What we talk to organizations about, however, is that, you know, no single tool set or tool is the foundation for an approach, or, you know, DevOps. And so what everyone needs to think about as they build this out, and as they think about utilizing APM technologies in the entire process, is that there's a lot of other layers to be addressed as you mature along your DevOps cycle. And so you must think about, how do you provide security from project to project? How do you scale your Jenkins and your CI/CD process to keep up with the demand of both your faster software development, but also as you grow and scale to different teams, and even outside of your company, working with third parties and so on. And then where APM again plays a really important role is in the control and visibility of everything that's happening related to what's coming out of your software delivery pipeline. So the pipeline does not stop at test. The pipeline stops at the end user, and when that end user has been able to feed back information to the life cycle, then and then there's control over that entire process, then you have achieved what we've defined as enterprise continuous delivery, or enterprise DevOps. This slide talks about that journey, and so you want to kind of think about, as I talk for the next couple minutes about this journey, and think about where you are on this, what we've defined as 4 quadrants of DevOps maturity. And I won't go into this in depth. This is actually a part of a full one-day seminar if folks are interested. But there's 2 axes. On the x-axis, we're looking at team-level approaches. So if you go to one click, Alan, you're going to get to what we define as quadrant 1, team-level agile, which is really that CI approach, just what developers do using using a CI platform like Jenkins and getting good at automation, but they haven't really progressed out to what we're calling CD, or heading towards where APM tools are implemented and integrated to the entire process. That is Quadrant 2. So when a team is taking that CI, they're starting to do deployment practices, they're getting information from production, they're listening to the ops teams, pulling data from the CA solutions, and bringing that back into the loop. That's team level CD, and we call it team level because really that's, you know, inside a large organization, this might just be a team or two or three. Now as you go up the y-axis, this is when you become, if you'll do one more click, Alan, this is where we're really talking about standardizing across the organization on CI practices. For instance, you know, we're now using a CI automation framework, and it's offered as a shared service. And then as you go up into the upper quadrant to the right, this is where you are absolutely running operations tooling, pulling information, putting it into the end-to-end process. You've standardized on whether it's, you know, CD automation. You've standardized on a lot of the CA technologies, and you truly are and have achieved DevOps as defined by you know, some of the guys that wrote the book on DevOps. And so to double click, and you go to the next slide, double click into these Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2. This is all the area where, you know, APM integration matters. And so one more click and you'll get to a slide that kind of shows, once you build this all out, there's 2 clicks.
Sure.
You could kind of read the points here, but this is where you're taking that APM data. You know, if you look at the Quadrant 2 level stuff, you're using things like Docker, or beginning to, you're packaging and managing apps and environments as part of the Jenkins output, and you're getting information from that deployment back into the development process. And like I said about Quadrant 4, here you are standardized, you're offering shared services, and you've really achieved what you would define as a company, as a culture of collaboration and integration. And so it's really important to think about where you are on this journey and explore the integrations that Matt's going to go through, because they are the ones that help you mature and take a step further when you're ready. So one thing we do talk about related to these quadrants is, you know, you can go any way you want. You can go from Quadrant 1 to Quadrant 2 or Quadrant 3, or you can even make an objective to get to Quadrant 4. But along the way, there's a lot of things you need to do, and one of those is working on integrating your ops side processes into the overall framework. So I think there's one more slide that Matt might want to talk about, and then we're going to go into a poll.
Actually, I just had a quick question, Brad. I just had a quick question. How do you think as an industry, how far along are we as far as these quadrants? Do you think it's, you know, are we still kind of in the infant stages of DevOps, or in your experience, do you see people kind of moving rapidly through these?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and we're actually collecting some data on this, and this group of people is going to help. I think, you know, I don't want to say we're in our infancy, but I almost think that we are in our infancy. I think everybody is trying. Everybody knows they have to go faster. Everyone knows that you can't go faster without high quality, and so every organization that I talk to, and I'm sure likewise, Matt, you guys. And I'm certain, you know, Alan, you know, they want to get here. They know that there's ways to do it, but you know, we like to use the concept of snowflake, right? Everybody kind of creates their own unique ways of doing things, and what we found is that people really do want to figure out, you know, how do I do this in a stepwise way? How do I, you know, if I'm just now doing CI, does it really make sense for me to go all in and kind of change my culture? Well, yes, but let me talk about, you know, you're not going to get there overnight, right? You're going to DevOps is a sea change in your organization. So you have to get everybody on board, and then provide the steps that are right for your organization at the right time. So we'll see people, you know, stay in that Quadrant 1 because they know they have to achieve a level of maturity in Quadrant 1 before they're even ready to take a step into 2 or 3 much less 4. So you know what? I think I talked myself into, yeah, I think we're still in our infancy. Maybe maybe toddlers will be a better place.
So I will tell you, in my opinion, as I said earlier, we are moving out of a phase 1 initial DevOps phase, and I hope to see us move into a phase 2 and perhaps phase 3 and 4 in the next few years. But let us move on now to our next slide, and I think we do have a polling question here. So Jules, if you can pop a poll.
Yeah, and this really ties into the discussion that we just had, right? So where do you think you are? You kind of, the first 4 questions really are kind of tied to those 4 quadrants. Do you think you're, devs using some CD and we're, but ops is not yet even on the radar? We're trying to connect those 2. That would be more the quadrant 2. Okay, CI is a standard. Those guys, everybody in dev is using Jenkins or using something else, but we really don't have the ops stuff connected yet. Or you know what? There's usually a number on every poll that says, hey, you know what? We're pretty good at DevOps, and it's something that we're looking at as an enterprise, and it's something we definitely are doing well at. Or of course, there's the other categories we don't really fit into these. So.
Absolutely, and then some maybe aren't at all. But we'll give you another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to cast your vote, and here are our answers. Wow. Interesting. 38% CI is a dev standard, but APM and ops are not integrated. Matt, what do you think as the APM person here?
My heart sinks. I feel kind of upset. Just generally lost the will to go on. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, there's a pony here somewhere. I mean, there's an opportunity, obviously.
Yeah, we see this all the time. I'm not surprised at all. And but you know what? The best DevOps organizations, or I shouldn't say the best, but let me be specific. The organizations that are able to get the most efficiency gains out of DevOps and get more code out faster are starting to pull in not just APM, but other tooling as well. So not surprised a bit.
Got it. Guys, we need to move on to our next questions because I do want to finish our presentation and save times for audience question. So let us move now over to a little bit about the CA APM Jenkins plugin. And, for those who didn't realize, Brad, you did a great job with that slide laying out so many. I think there's 11 or 1,200 plugins for Jenkins today. And, it's easy to get lost in the sea. But the CA APM Jenkins plugin, I think, has it's kind of unique in its class. And we'll let Matt talk a little bit about it. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to make this efficient. So basically, the problem that you just laid out with the poll question, that 38% of our audience here is not really bringing together the ops and CI parts of the conversation. We really see that APM can be the glue, and so being very specific about that, this integration really adds shades of color between green and red, right? One of the things we do as part of the CI practice is we're going to say, okay, a build is good to go, right? It's good to go. And then Jenkins does some risk, I call them risk measurements, right, around the build. Well, this kind of, most of the things are typically focused on availability or very sort of Boolean factors, like it just meets some performance threshold based on some tests we ran against it. So what we can do with this integration is really bring together Jenkins and APM in a bidirectional communication, and allow the developers to take into account a more granular type of performance measurement into understanding the quality of a build, right? So everyone in here, I would expect that most of us, based on the poll question, are not that familiar with APM in general. But one of the things that APM, CA's APM tool in particular does, is measure the performance at a very granular detail of not only individual methods like a profiler, right, but it also kind of goes up and stitches together from the end user's experience or the tester's experience all the way through all the different API calls and sort of the web of interactions, and makes a complete picture of each piece of the performance picture. So on top of that, one of the things that it does is it monitors for change. So it understands automatically what changed inside the application, as well as what changed about the performance of the application. And so the reason I point that out is APM can go and say, between these two builds, and Alan, you can actually just go to the next slide since we're short for time.
Sure.
Between these two builds, we can actually say, okay, this is what the performance of the method, particular methods were. So if you want to understand at a very low level of granularity inside your code, we'll actually show you and take you in context from the Jenkins interface into the APM interface to say, okay, something between these two builds, I obviously see I had a spike around build 7 or 8. Something is making this method slow. Let's jump in and understand all the things that method was interacting with, if maybe it was dependent upon a database or whatever, and it'll take you straight in context. Now, that's interesting. We actually use this within our own development, right, with our own SaaS products, and we find that it answers some very key questions like, what if I want to limit the amount of calls I'm making to a particular API? Because everybody's got APIs that we pay for, right? If it's a mapping API or whatever. What if I'm paying for usage? API can tell me if that usage has gone up, right, between builds. What if I want to know about I'm overusing a critical system like authentication? Maybe I'm re-authenticating every time when I should only be doing it once for a page on the mobile app. We can go and discover those sorts of things without you having to tell us about it. And then what if, and this is where things get kind of complicated, what if the module that I'm working on right now, I'm doing something that is causing a problem upstream, and it might not even be obvious. It's just that it's getting slower based on what I'm doing, or I'm causing too much chattiness, right? Well, because we're pushing all that data back into Jenkins, or at least the relevant pieces, that stuff starts to pop out, right? And it's in the console that you're used to. And when you want to move to the next one, then great, right? You can dive into the APM tool and discover why things are running slowly. And the great thing about an APM tool versus a profiler, right, is that APM, you can just leave it running in your, or have it spin up as part of your testing environment, testing harness, and it's kind of always there, and it doesn't adversely impact the performance of the application. Because normally with this level of visibility, you would expect it to sort of mutate the performance of the application. It would start to make it run more slowly by virtue of the fact that we're watching. But that's the great thing about an APM solution, is it doesn't necessarily do that. So I don't know if you want to just pop to the next slide and kind of discuss at the end here. But the same goes for cross-build performance. And this is actually an example we ran where we actually can see that between builds, something really bad happened to our performance. It actually looks like it got really fast, but that's because something was broken. APM discovers that, and Jenkins makes it very obvious, right, that data is which build is causing the problem. And if you remember what I said before, APM is watching for changes as well. So when you see this in your Jenkins console and understand that you have a cross-build performance anomaly, right, like something sticks out, you can zip in, double-click and zip into APM to understand, okay, these are the changes that were being made in the environment. And note, when I say changes, I'm not just talking about the code that you might be producing. I'm also talking about changes in the environment, because APM is aware of things like Docker containers, right? It's aware of sort of shifts happening in the ground that your app is standing on, and all that stuff gets brought together, and then becomes very obvious what's happening. So it really adds a shades of color that don't exist traditionally into the CI process to make you understand or help you understand the risk of each one of these builds, and then also help you exclude other factors from what might be impacting the load performance. So I just said a lot there because we're short on time, but.
Understood. We should mention that, of course, if you want more information on the specific plugin, it's available both at the CA website and I believe at the Jenkins community site as well, and maybe perhaps even the CloudBees site. But let's talk a little bit about rubber meeting the road here with use cases, integrated workflow, and that to me is the heart of this, right? And Matt, why don't you give us a quick one?
Sure. So this is sort of the workflow of how this all goes. This is more of a sort of a deeper dive technical understanding, but really it sort of shows the pipeline, right? You check in new code, Jenkins, which presumably many of you are using today based on the poll. Jenkins builds and runs the test. We go and we check for the pass-fail condition, and remember, the pass-fail condition can be a lot more sophisticated now because it can use all that method level and transaction level information from APM to kind of add all the performance data. Then that data gets pushed through to the APM plugin, which again is available on the Jenkins website, and then the performance data gets pulled back. You generate the dashboard, your normal dashboards in Jenkins, and then we go and update the APM tool for the operations team and the pre-prod team, which actually helps make a system of record for you to kind of push things into production, depending on where you are in your life cycle. APM can kind of serve that function for you. So that's in a nutshell, Alan.
Got it. And if I can make this slide go, whoop, I made it go too far. Jules, would you be able to move it back? I seem to have lost my buttons. One more. One more. Okay, we did our workflow. Okay, let's, you know what, we actually have some fine time for Q&A, guys. But before we do, thank you both for kind of explaining 50,000-foot level what CI/CD is, what APM is, how they can work together for an enhanced benefit for customers. And that really, if you're going to take one thing out of today's webinar, folks, take that, right? That, you know, DevOps is, we have singular tools in DevOps, but we can achieve 1 + 1 = 3 kind of results when we use them together in a way such as this. So, a couple of questions. Is there a Jenkins plugin available for CA APM? I think we kind of answered that one already. But the next one was, within CA APM, are containers or Docker specifically supported? Matt, do you know?
Yes. Yeah, we're actually going to be, well, I won't steal our thunder here. We're going to be bundling together a bunch of different container technology. But yeah, if you're an existing CA APM customer, you can go and grab that today. Or actually, I believe we're actually #1 in Google search for certain kinds of Docker monitoring. So you know, feel free to go and grab it off GitHub.
Excellent. Next question is, it's more of a statement, but it's hard to get ops to buy in. Too many people resistant to change. You know what? Yes and no. Sometimes it's hard to get dev to buy in, and it's hard to get security to buy in, but if we don't try, it never gets done. And I think, you know, I'm heading to London after this webinar today for Gene Kim's DevOps Enterprise Summit, and it's chock full of large organizations, and not just unicorns, where they have gotten dev to buy in. And I would, you know, say yes, it is, but that doesn't mean, just because something is hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Matt and Brad, I'm going to imagine you probably agree with me.
Yes, certainly. Yes? Yeah, certainly. I think, you know, it's just it's cliche, and it's hard to kind of, you know, just say it. You know, sharing is caring, right? I mean, helping people understand the value in, you know, what automation throughout the development lifecycle has done for development is an indicator of what that same automation, right, that same sets of technology can do for the ops team. The ops team knows that containerization is here. They know that there's this wave coming towards them fast that is a wave of faster builds and code that's actually better prepared to go into production than it ever was before. So I think it's just a matter of helping those guys understand that this is not for unicorns only. This is many companies, as Matt pointed out, many very conservative, what would be considered brick and mortar companies are doing very innovative things with tools that are trusted, with companies that can, you know, will take a support call if there's a problem, right? So this is not just developers being, you know, cutting edge innovators. This is this is developers trying to provide better quality output and for those ops teams to have better success with. So I think it's just a matter of educating and maybe even pointing them to resources that might help them. And like I said earlier, there's a preponderance of ops people that are attending DevOps and even CD-related events that I've been part of. So it's changing.
Absolutely. I mean, I will tell you, and Brad, you know this, we just finished the first half of a road show around CD Summit, Jenkins Days, part of our DevOps Connect, and I would say a majority of the people there are ops. I don't think an ops guy raises his hand and says, I want my job to be harder, right, or I want to make things more complicated. Right, and if you could show them that this makes their job easier, it makes it somewhat simpler, they could do more faster, but have better quality and better security, of course they want to do it. All right, but let's move on. Just real quickly, KPI, does that mean Key Performance Indicator? Yes, it does, unless Matt or Brad, you say different.
Nope, it does.
Yep. Okay. Specific, I don't even know, Matt, if you're going to know this. We are using CA APM 10.2, and is Docker supported in that release?
In CA APM 10.2, you can actually use the Docker field pack. As far as formal support, the formal support, I believe, I'll get the final version, but it may be a distinction without a difference. You can go and put it on there as of now with 10.2, and you may need to upgrade for formal support, but it doesn't really matter because it's the same code. So.
Okay, that's fair enough, guys. We have less than a minute left, and I wanted to take that time first of all to thank our attendees and registries. If you're not listening to this live, but it will be available on YouTube and on DevOps.com, so I'm sure many more people will listen to it even than here live. But you can still send, if you have a question or something not clear to you, I wanted to put up these links. You can visit CA's APM site to find out more about their APM solutions. You can visit CloudBees and Jenkins at both CloudBees and Jenkins.io, and I strongly encourage you to visit all three. That being said, Matt, Brad, thanks for a great discussion today on APM and CD and CI, and hope to have you both back again soon. Thank you very much to our audience. Thank you to CA for sponsoring today's event. And with that, this is Alan Schimmel, DevOps.com. Thank you all and have a great day. We'll see you on another webinar soon. Bye-bye, everyone.